Hey there, welcome to Girls on Key. Today's video is an interview I did with Magdalena Ball about her poetry book Unmaking Atoms. Now, Magdalena Ball is a novelist, she's a poet, she's a reviewer and an interviewer. She's been widely published in literary journals, anthologies, and she is the author of several books of poetry and fiction. So today's book club is Magdalena Ball with Unmaking Atoms. Hey everyone, so I'm here in Newcastle with Magdalena Ball, and she's going to do a reading from her book Unmaking Atoms, which we talked about, and then I'm going to ask her a couple of questions about the book as well, so that's exciting. Stick around and let's get into it.
I'll start with this one. It's called Alien World. And what of water? Simple old H2O. Clear liquid stuff you drink every day. Most abundant compound on the Earth's surface. Seawater, water vapor, ice. 70% of the human body. You know all that. Yet, licking moist lips, you also know the habitable zone depends on liquid water. Just enough warmth. Goldilocks. Down here, of course, we take it for granted. Slurp with abandon, drip down the chin, spray the car, waste without a second thought. Drink now, slowly, with knowledge that throughout the universe, aliens everywhere, your stardust relations thirst. Okay, I'll read this one. It has had a bit of airtime, but I'm going to read it anyway. It's called Shallots and Garlic, and it's after an Indonesian fairy tale called Bawang Merah Bawang Putih. Every now and then, when the moon is so full it glows green, the wind might howl a lullaby from another atmosphere. Then you'll take me by the hand, tell me I'm diligent. Show me what to do, and I'll do it with grace, humility, and well. You'll tell me I'm garlic, the good girl, heady with the pleasure of service. But mostly the sky is moonless. No breeze moves the air. You'll know me as shallots, lazy, sloppy, the ugly sister. I know what I've lost. Instead of cleaning, I'll howl my dark side out like a pumpkin full of vipers. My eyes won't touch the earth, chin too high to kiss. I'll eat the world and spit it out, licking hungry chops, leaving no bones. I'll read the first poem in the book. The first three poems in the book, The Last Report of the Day, Charitable Crumb, and Luminous Air, I could just read all three and finish with that.
That'd be great. I was going to talk about those anyway. So.
Yeah, they're kind of a series, and I wrote them in response to three poets who I think of almost as poetry mothers. And so, and we had a little chat about this beforehand, and a lot of the book was written in response to my mother's death, but I also wanted to explore this whole notion of inheritance and what remains, I guess, and in a poetic context, in almost a meta-poetic context in this work. I treated these three poems as if they were sort of like spiritual mothers or poetic mothers. And I also have a sort of similar, it's not a smooth, easy relationship with these three poets either. I don't love everything they've done. And sometimes I read their work and I'm uneasy. I feel like, I have inherited something from them, but it's not necessarily something good. So that's just a little introduction. So the first one, The Last Report of the Day, is Adrienne Rich. And I do use little bits of her through the poem. I saw you, Adrienne Rich. In my dream, we were walking like old friends, conspicuously cool, our maps drawn before we took up pens, eyes searching for something deeper than the wrinkles on our skin. I felt your hand, crooked with arthritis, brush mine. In the depths of my consciousness, like a stirring of memory, You became every mother I had ever lost to a bigger cause. The world too hungry, the lines too sharp for me to cross. I was a little girl then, all my unspoken need pulsing like a lighthouse, your untranslatable language transmitted through my pores, a scent you recognized. You didn't need to say anything. The battery of signals that battered you, like we've all been battered. I felt those signals in my shoulders, hunched against a rising wind. Gently, but with reasonable force, you pushed my scapula back, told me sternly, like any mother would, to stand up straight. And the next one, Charitable Crumb, is a response to Elizabeth Bishop. And it actually begins with a little line from Bishop, epigraph. The sun set in the same sea, the same odd sun rose from the sea. And that's from her poem, Elizabeth Bishop's poem, Crusoe in England. And I do reference some of that as well. It is still dark. The river ripples below us while we drink coffee on that balcony, together at last, after so many years of entanglement, remote whispers down the phone line, and later, whatever means we could find to keep the conversation going. Now you lean in close like a confidant, talk about observation and longing, all that you never had, mother, father, siblings, lovers, the loss that kept coming like water suspended over blue-gray stones. In the hard mouth of the world, we find sudden softness released into our fingers that intertwine and separate, typing words breathlessly against the rising steam of time. Our mutual loss holding us here, with this bottomless cup and the same odd sun. And the final poem in the series, Luminous Air, was written again in response to Edna St. Vincent Millay. So my third poetry mother. And it also begins with a little line from her, A Few Figs from Thistles, which is, come and see my shining palace built upon the sand. We forgot the secret again, lost on the island, you in your bare beauty bringing up goosebumps in the audience while you tilted your head, whispering, small, small. The rain was full of ghosts that night, the air luminous with immortality. When I next caught your eye, it was already too late. Your heart broke over memory's halls, marbled fingers tapping against my breath like dried figs in the early hour. I crawled through indiscriminate dust, looking for the missing light. Despite the smooth departure, you were not resigned, not found in easy places, even by the silver knocking of silent fingers, where death becomes being.
Thank you so much for your reading. It was just divine.
My pleasure.
I'm very lucky to be here in Newcastle and be able to have you in my lounge room.
Oh, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. And so we're going to talk a bit about the book now, just for you guys to get a bit of insider knowledge. And so you've talked, we've talked a little bit about, before we came on camera, a little bit about the genesis of the book, when your mum was passing away from cancer, and how a lot of that, the threads of that come through in your poems in this particular volume here. And so talk to me about, because you said that you were working on a novel, and then you felt that writing prose, you thought, okay, I have to write poetry right now. This is the time to be doing that. So talk to me about that.
Yes, I think it's a timely question because, poetry is kind of having another moment. I mean, poetry never goes away for those of us who love poetry. I've never stopped reading or writing poetry since I was, like 6. So it's always been a part of my life. But, I'm seeing a kind of almost global response to poetry that I haven't seen for a while. It's always been a little bit of a marginalized art to work in, and it seems now that people are calling poets dangerous. They're reading poetry, they're talking about poetry. It's almost like the the counter response to politics, which has never been the case, and not for years. Poetry was always kind of an apolitical thing to do. Not that there wasn't political poetry, but it never seemed a big act. It always seemed a kind of domestic thing.
Yes.
And it doesn't now.
Yeah.
And so I think it's because, and we started talking about this a little bit, this notion that poetry deals with complexity in such a beautiful way that doesn't, really doesn't buy into sort of the spin, I guess, or the rhetoric of politics. It's almost the counter to that. It tries, its whole purpose is to go somewhere deeper, more intuitive, more real, richer, and to really reflect, this multifaceted nature of experience, which, you can't do when you try to cage something into a soundbite, or as politics often does, to simplify to a point where, things become very black and white.
Yes, and in one of the reviews, I mentioned that Magdalena's book is written in 17 dimensions, and it absolutely is
Was that Ivy's? I loved Ivy's review so much.
Ivy Island, and to say that this is a book just about processing grief is not. It doesn't do it justice, or it does a disservice, because obviously you have a micro and a macro kind of exploration of materiality, and that's not a grief book in my view. You know what I mean? It's like, people are like kind of quick to kind of put books into categories, and I think no, not at all with this. And also obviously your intellect in the way that you approach the science, and you bring in physics, astronomy, science fiction. So it's just a joy and a wonder to delve into this book. So just for those looking for something to read on the bus, which is what I did for 3 days.
Look, I think big grief too. It's sad, but it's not just sad. It's so much more than that. Especially if you lose somebody like a mother. A father. Mother, parent. It's on the one hand, it's grief, it's loss, but there's so many more things going on about what does this mean, in a broader context. Everybody loses somebody. Grief is omnipresent. Death is ahead of all of us.
Yes.
It's a very key part of who we are and how we define who we are. And so these big topics, they're never simple.
That's right.
They're never simple, and there's always a whole range of complexity involved in it. And that's why poetry is such a good way to kind of move beyond the poison of the immediate pain into saying, well, how does this reflect who I am? How do I remake myself? How do I remake the world? How do I reapproach the world in a way that makes sense to me now that I can no longer pretend that there's no such thing as death?
Yes.
Which I think we do for a large proportion of our lives until it hits us.
And the title, Unmaking Atoms, obviously we've talked a little bit before we came on camera about narrative, using narrative to reinterpret and to piece together, and it's almost like an assembling and a disassembling in a way, isn't it? And so, not that I know that you mentioned in one of your interviews, it's not specifically like catharsis or healing in that way, but in terms of the remaking, what was the journey that you came out of it? What was as you went through those poems? How did that help you specifically?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, it's a complex question.
Sorry.
No, it's good. The complex questions are great. But I think there's a couple of things. So for one, and I think this also goes deep into meditative practice and how we define ourselves in a broader sense. But this idea of what is it? How do we come to terms with the fact that we're not just individuals, we're part of a wider system? And some of the poems in the collection, it's not just about my mother, of course. So some of the poems in the collection are about ecological destruction, which is, again, a common thing for me. I like to play around with that, mainly because I think about it.
And
often.
You said that you thought that your work was apocalyptic often. What did you mean?
Eco-poetic, apocalyptic, I don't know. Because I'm very conscious of, I guess, what is effectively, an impending ecological crisis. And I guess as I get older too, I really feel more and more connected and less like this kind of, individual overlord of the earth, human, and less in an odd sort of way. I've always thought I was an alien. It's an odd sort of way of being, kind of seeing myself as being part of the wider ecosystem, as being, animal as opposed to human.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm human. Just exploring that notion of how does one fit in with other people? How do we connect? And how does that connection connect with the earth? And how does the earth connect with the broader? And again, just playing with these notions of physics and what does physics tell us about who we are, and this idea of being part of being molecular. So all of these things, are my geeky interests that I'd like to play with in language.
And do you think that because
if I was smarter, I might be playing with them in math.
Yeah.
I'm not smart enough to play with them in math. And language has always been a medium I've been drawn to. So I feel like I'm exploring in almost a scientific way, but linguistically.
I was actually just going to say that there's almost like a scientist's eye, that observational eye that you have. And what's your background in science? Like, tell me more about it.
It's a strange background,
Does
yes.
it come into your day job? Or?
I do have science in my day job, so I work in a research and innovation group.
Yeah.
So in a big company. So yes, there is a lot of science there, and I work with a lot of scientists. I'm not actually scientifically trained. I've got degrees in English literature, primarily some business stuff, just for money earning purposes. But,
do you wish that you had studied science, or was it something that you, as an alternative career, that you?
There's a part of me that really does, and there's a part of me that sometimes actually, like, maybe secretly, scoop, but actually watches, goes, okay. So I was complaining to my fabulously brilliant son, who's studying physics.
Oh,
he's not living my dream. Yeah, he's actually doing physics and art, but he's
disclaimer there.
Yeah, he's pretty brilliant when it comes to physics and pure mathematics.
Oh, wow.
It just comes very oddly naturally to him. I say it comes naturally to him, and he gets mad at me and says, no, I work really hard, and it's about working, and it's really, a lot of it is just about self-definition, and I guess early on, I wasn't good at a certain type of math, and I just said, good at English, I'm not good at math, I'm going to focus on this. I chose a path, and that was the path I continued to go on.
Okay.
I didn't grow up, I grew up in a very, very much an artsy sort of environment.
Did you? Yeah.
Everybody in my family were, artists or readers or musicians, or, there was a lot of that.
Influences.
Yeah, that kind of environment. We had nobody who could act. So, so I never really except no, I shouldn't even say that, because my dad actually was teaching that. So on my father's side, yes, there is that.
Yeah.
And he did take me when I was very little. My parents split up very early. That's really young. And my father used to take me and my brother on access visits. We would go to the Hayden Planetarium, and we watch all these things, these fabulous things at the Hayden Planetarium, which is a big New York City planetarium.
Yeah.
And we'd go to these shows inside the dome. And we'd watch things like, how the world could end. So that's the origin of the apocalyptic thinking.
I was going to say.
And it's still with me. It was such a big impact on me, those shows, and this big, I was gobsmacked. I loved it, and it stayed with me for years and years. It came into my novels, and all my poetry kind of reflects on those early sort of astronomical interests.
Yeah.
But
so many threads. There's so many threads. And then with your work and prose, how do you feel like your practice influences your practice now with your poetry? Kind of, you've got so many threads to your bow, strings to your bow.
Yeah, I do think that 90% of what I do, both in terms of my day job and in terms of my writing, is semantical. So it's about playing around with words. Even if the words are, kind of relatively mundane, even if I'm sticking my words in a kind of spreadsheet format and trying to use bullet points and, PowerPoints and stuff like that, I still feel like communication of things is always my underlying desire. And even in a work environment where people really do want, constantly being told to be more succinct. Robust by nature, I think.
You're in the right format.
It's completely obvious, Do you have to use a metaphor for that? But the truth is, I think that I'm always trying to communicate concepts in one form or another. learn and communicate.
And the communication through this book, I felt like it's a heart thing, because, and I don't know how to explain how you do this. It's like you're on this macro level, but then there's this kind of underlying heart thing that hits you. I can't really explain that better than that. It's like you're able to kind of bring it all back to this point, and it's I think it's a philosophical kind of thing, you know.
Yeah. Even anthropomorphic, because I think that I will try and I'll say, okay, I'm gonna there's a poem there, Mapping Pluto.
Yeah.
Which was written really very concretely in response to the mapping of Pluto, which was happening,
at the
NASA
time.
was doing it at the time.
Yeah.
I wrote it, so I thought, I'll write a poem about mapping Pluto, but of course
it lost its status.
Oh yeah, that's right. And then I could it all came back to death and the ICU, and the whole notion of Pluto as the god of death. And this mythological thing, and I just was playing around with every aspect of Pluto I could think of, but not just the planet.
Yeah, and is there a gravity? When you're saying comes back to those things, is it like gravity? Like, so you feel like when you're writing it, sort of, kind of, there's a bias back to those themes when you were writing it?
I think so.
Yeah, it was sort of like this unavoidable kind of thing that needed to be processed, I guess.
Yeah, and also these are the things that I like to read. I'm drawn to this kind of.
Do you read sci-fi? Like, what do you read?
Oh God, I read very widely.
Yeah. I think the compulsive reader. It's a good time to talk about that. Just as a little plug for our readers and our audience. That you run a website called The Compulsive Reader, and it's fantastic. It's got awesome reviews. You've got a podcast. There's some awesome books and names on there, so I'll put the link in the description below. Please check it out, sign up to their mailing list. It's fantastic.
Compulsivereader.com.
And I'm sure there's a lot of you guys who are compulsive readers out there who are watching this, so as we are. So.
Yes, so it's nearly in its 20th year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's quite amazing.
So there you go.
To think that it's been going for so long.
There you go.
But it just started in response to I was at home, maternity leave with my first child, and a children's website that I kind of, did in those early days. I was kind of desperate to find out anything. And they asked if anybody wanted to do any reviewing, and I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And they ended up sending me this absolutely beautiful 2-volume Frank McCourt, set, and it was lovely, and there were interviews, and would you like to interview him? And I was like, yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. and then I was doing a few things for them, and I kept getting these beautiful volumes, and I thought, this is so good. This is what this is what I was born to do.
Fantastic.
And then they folded, and I said, I have to keep this going. I can't lose out on this. I want the perks. I want the books. I'm here for the books. As Selena put it. And also I love this idea of being given a mandate. Being given a mandate to do more than just read a book. To go that next level, to really go into it, and slow myself down. We live in such a fast-paced world, and even our reading. And I've noticed this, even our reading through the use of the internet and everything is kind of, you're always distracted by stuff. It's fast. Everything is fast.
You guys probably think 20 minutes is a long video to get through, but if you've made it this far, congratulations. Right. You have a great attention span, so well done.
Yes. Everything is quick. And everything is, we are always encouraged, I think, to do things a little bit more superficially to gain time.
Yes.
And I totally understand that. I feel that all the time. But reading, as a reader, and I always think of myself as a reader first. The first thing I've ever, the first way I've ever defined myself is through the books that were read to me as a child. That I ultimately started reading myself, and those stories, Where the Wild Things Are, Little Bear. These are the Dr. Seuss books. These are books that I feel almost part of my kind of my body.
Yeah.
They're part of my cells and how I define myself. I mean, especially DNA. Yeah. And so I really love the idea of being, giving myself a particular need to go back and revisit that book and say, what is it that worked for me in this book? What is it done that's beautiful? What is bothering me? What didn't quite gel here? and to really take it to the next level and explore some of the themes a little bit more deeply and the contexts.
So I was just wondering, have you ever had anyone, a reader of yours, kind of give a different perspective where you've...
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally. Absolutely. I mean,
How do you find that?
Good reviewers of my books. There've been a couple of bad ones on Amazon. I
have read through.
I'm kind of grateful for those because
I have read through them, so
they at least provide balance. I mean, at least it doesn't look like only my friends read and review my books. There are also a couple of people who pointed out the F-bombs in my fiction.
Well, and if it gives you any consolation, the Amazon reviews of the classics are hilarious.
I know.
There's just people who even review like classic books and the way that they do it.
I know. My favorite, somebody wrote a review of one of my novels, Black Cow, and said something like, I couldn't read past the first page, and here's my detailed review.
Here's my 10-page review
of
your first page.
That's right. I guessed, having not read it, that this is what the book would be about, and my review is. I really wish that the characters had an arc. Yeah.
That's so funny.
I know, it is so, they've not all been good. I will just say, though, that I have yet to have a bad poetry review. And poetry readers tend to be, I don't know if I can generalize. I'm sure there are poetry writers out there who have bad poetry reviews, but my experience has been that poetry readers tend to take more time, that they're in it for a deeper experience. They're not looking necessarily solely to be lost in a fictive dream. They really want to engage with the language. They're not looking for a story all the time.
Yeah.
So I mean, yes, I have had poetry reviewers who have totally shown me things about my work that I never even thought about. When you write a poem, you just write a poem, don't you? And all these things are coming together when you put it down, but a lot of it is completely intuitive.
So it's almost like there's the act of creation as an ongoing thing, isn't it? It's like the symbiotic relationship between the reader and the writer. Once it's done, it's still living, it's still being recreated in the minds and hearts of the readers. And
Absolutely.
That's fascinating, and that comes into your title too.
Yes, and that totally is one of the things that draws me also to poetry.
Fascinating launching point.
I think so. I mean, I think that's what all poets want too, is this, I don't think poetry necessarily is a kind of, finished thing that you hand over and say it's done. It's a constant renegotiation of this meaning between reader and writer, and it's what I absolutely love about it. I mean, even this notion of grief, you put something down and you say, I'm playing with these words now, but please bring yours, and together we make it into something that's not necessarily all 100% bad. It's also a rebuilding into a shared experience, and it's it's in many ways beautiful. Too.
And shared meanings.
Yeah, shared meanings, new meanings, new recreations, and I feel that as reader, not just as as writer. When I read a book.
Yeah.
And there are some poetry books that I do go back to again and again and again.
Me too. I think you guys would be the same.
Yes. And when I go back to them each time, sometimes I just go back because I want to write something, and I think, just go back, Lisa Gordon's book, it's in her books, I think, it's Dorothy Porter, always, I find something in there that sparks something in me, but also it seems like there's enough of an openness about the work to allow me to engage in it differently each time.
We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much, Magdalena. That was an awesome conversation.
Thank you.
I think people will really appreciate listening to this. This will be Monday when you guys are watching it for the Monday Book Club. I'll put links to all of Magdalena's books, all of her work, and please check those out. If you have any comments or you want to join in the discussion about what we've just talked about, please pop it in the comments below, and I'm happy to chat with you. If you have any ideas or people that you'd like me to interview, also pop those there, and we'll endeavour to do that. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next video.